You are listening to Talking Star Wars.
Hello, Star Wars fans. I'm Connor,
And I'm Alex.
and we're talking Star Wars.
Thank you for joining us for episode 84 of our podcast, which is about watch orders in Star Wars media.
Yeah, it's been a few. Just took a little break during the holidays, and now we're looking forward to a stretch of another few Star Wars episodes and get into a mystery next season, unless we've already talked about what our next season is, in which case it's not very much a mystery. We're talking about proper viewing order, and I think that there's a couple of reasons why the viewing order is kind of contentious for how to watch Star Wars because George Lucas decided to release the films out of chronological order.
Yeah, you'll see this pretty much in any media that is released, where the release order and the chronological order of the media differs. You see this in many different areas. You have prequels, such as The Hobbit being released after the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Many book series come out where there's prequels and sequels, but where the chronology is all over the place. And you have people who strongly think you should do chronological order, and people who strongly think you should do in release order or a mix thereof, or different starting points for different media. Star Wars is no different, and I think Connor and I have different opinions about that. But there are also, I will also acknowledge there's probably no, well, there's a couple of wrong ways to do it. You don't start with Empire Strikes Back, but there are a variety of valid ways to watch Star Wars, and as long as you're having fun, we're not here to judge you, maybe a little bit sometimes. But we're going to we talked about proper viewing order, and we'll talk about the various viewing options that you have. Connor, do you want to start us off with your preferred viewing order? What do you think is the best viewing order for Star Wars?
Yeah, I think word preferred is perfect just because Star Wars fans are diverse and we
We're a bunch
all
of jackasses, you mean?
we're we have similarities in that we are jackasses. We like Star Wars, but you know, do you enjoy the more bounty hunter pirate aspects? Are you more of a fan of the science fiction space battles? Or are you more of a fan of the mystical, uh, monk wizards? It's there's many different ways to enjoy the series, and I think that every preference out there is valid as long as someone enjoys Star Wars for some reason. Um, I the I think the like more most natural way of viewing them, if I were to say, as an adult fan, this is what I would sit down to watch. It would be how they were released, just from the natural progression of filmmaking. That is what uh, uh, I find most appealing as far as sort of a visual experience, but also a narrative experience because we can still maintain that mystery of who Darth Vader is if, I'm sitting in this story fresh. So that's what I would answer, but I don't know if I would necessarily say that's the best way for a fresh fan to step into it. But how about yourself?
So I'm largely with you, Connor, in that I believe, and I say this about pretty much all media, actually, not just Star Wars, is that release order is the way to go for me. Because not only does the world itself evolve, but whatever artistic individuals, whether it's a single author to a whole multimedia franchise creative group like Star Wars has become, you get the progression of ideas, the progression of the context of the world the stories are being written in and take place in, and the real life events that are influencing Star Wars and the real life technology of filmmaking and special effects that is advancing. So it's like, yeah, the Halo franchise. Like, yeah, technically, did Halo Reach come out before, like, chronologically? Is it before the very first Halo game? Yes, but that would be a jarring experience to play
Mhm.
one of the more recent Star Wars or Halo games released in the last 10 years to then before a 25-year-old game that, while a foundational first-person shooter, is kind of aged at the time. But then you can see the progression of game mechanics if you start with Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo 3. You do the same with Star Wars. So you watch the Original trilogy, which is A New Hope, into Empire Strikes Back, into Return of the Jedi. It's the story of Luke becoming a Jedi and the story of how Darth Vader is his father and then is eventually turns on the Emperor and redeems himself. If you start with episodes one, two, three, that reveal is spoiled. And the prequel movies, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, were written and filmed assuming that you had watched the original movies. They are knowing reactions to the story that came later, not written as if you don't know what's happening. You can tell that in the way the stories are structured. That it is a ironic tragedy in that everyone is aware of what will happen to Anakin Skywalker. You are not wondering if he is going to fall to the dark side. You are watching it happen and wondering how.
Right. It's a process of learning the steps of how he lost faith in the Jedi Order, turned to the dark side. Um, the only point I would see in starting with a Phantom Menace is if someone were just a stickler about numerology, having, I want to watch them in order. Uh, but still, that is kind of a weird way to experience a series that has gone on for so many generations, so many decades, to start with something that is so, you know, millennial, going to that films that were made with actual film in the 70s, and then, modern day. It's just kind of aesthetically jarring, and it's also narratively, just as you said, not how the stories were intended to be told.
Yeah. Yeah. For a few first-time viewer needing to experience the world for the first time, release order. Though I would say for our two sort of side movies, which are a Solo, a Star Wars story, and Rogue One, you can watch those anytime after you have watched the original trilogy, I would say. Um, you definitely should not watch a Rogue One before you've watched A New Hope, and you should not watch Solo, a Star Wars story before you've watched Empire Strikes Back.
I can
Probably
see that.
even Return of the Jedi, because
Mhm.
you need to know who Lando was. You need to put that in context. Those movies were written in the context of the original trilogy. But I mean, do I think you need to watch The Force Awakens and then Rogue One and then the Last Jedi and then Solo, a Star Wars story, like in the release order? But the trilogies themselves need to be watched in their release order. And again, this is speaking strictly to the movies and the films themselves as the primary tentpole media of the Star Wars franchise. It is
Yeah.
not necessarily the reading order. The viewing order, I would say, is good for rewatches. But the first time you're experiencing it, that is my idea. It is not the only viewing order, but it's the one I recommend. But Connor, what about you? For a first viewer, any other thoughts?
Yeah, those side movies are interesting because, I mean, it could be a way to experience it if you go through just how they were released. So watching Force Awakens, Rogue One, um, I guess looking at it that way, though, it doesn't really make sense to return to the Death Star as the next narrative beat. Um, Trying to imagine going from Revenge of the Sith to Rogue One. Um, I don't know. Those side movies I think could come after a watch of the first nine films in the series, viewing them as it almost ancillary media, where yes, this is a Star Wars movie. You can watch it, you can enjoy it, but it's not necessarily connected to the string of films. But yeah, I think that for that initial watch, it should be at least theatrical episodes one through nine. Then, if you're enjoying it, watch these other Star Wars movies in any order. You've been introduced to Han, you've been introduced to the Death Star. Uh, Same with shows like The Mandalorian and or things like that.
Yeah. So those are our preferred viewing orders, but it's not the
Yeah.
only viewing order out there. It is not necessarily, as we said, a viewing order for someone who's rewatching.
Mhm.
But even for a first-time viewer, there are other schools of thought. Connor and I might think this is an example of heterodoxy, but we allow all within the Church of Star Wars. So there's one popular viewing order would be chronologically, where it's like the being able to put things in order in time is more important for some people than release order. So they
Mhm.
would just say watch episodes 1 through 9 in order. In fact, you could then watch episode one, two, three, then watch Solo: A Star Wars Story, then watch Rogue One,
Mhm.
then watch A New Hope, and so on. So that is one potential viewing order. There's a common sense for those who are more open to adding other media that if you're going to commit to it, watch the original trilogy, but then when you go back to the prequel trilogy, watch the entirety of the Clone Wars between episodes 2 and 3,
Yes.
which does make Revenge of the Sith a better movie by its inclusion.
Mhm. There's so much time spent with Anakin, just specifically for that reason alone, seeing his character develop. On top of that, you learn so much more backstory in the relationship that he has with Obi-Wan. You get to learn about Ahsoka, who is a very rich character. You learn about this conflict, which is mentioned really in the films briefly. We see it briefly in Revenge of the Sith on a couple of planets. That is a fraction of the what the scope of the Clone Wars was. Um, so just getting that breadth of what the galaxy has gone through and what the characters has gone through makes that gap between episodes 2 and 3 feel like there's so much more rich development. And that leads into, I think, one of my options for first time viewing. I think that some other ways to look at it would be if I am trying to introduce this to a child, um, you know, if I have a kid, I want to show them Star Wars, am I going to show them A New Hope? Are they going to have the same sort of experience watching A New Hope that I did if they're used to other media so much
Yep.
uh I don't know, vibrant and fast and loud and faster, louder, more intense.
If
Um
they're cultural children, certainly.
yeah, if they're cultivated, if I can keep the world from infecting them, but um let's say from someone who is uh 12. That's what George Lucas, I think, sort of positioned the core audience of Star Wars as made for 12-year-olds. If you're having a modern day 12-year-old watch a Star Wars movie, what would be the first one you would have them watch now to get their attention?
I agree that New Hope can be hard on a modern audience, especially someone who has more entertainment options. Empire Strikes Back is a timeless classic, but you can't watch Empire Strikes Back without watching A New Hope to really get the impact of it. Solo: Star Wars Story, despite not being probably one of my not favorite Star Wars movies, has enough action to it and enough quippiness that it can be appealing. I mean, the visuals are just so much better, honestly, in the prequel trilogy, with the the better technology. Not making a sense that like the quality is better, but just the tools available were so much more advanced that it can be more palatable to a viewer who is not in their 30s.
Right? More modern
Um,
sensibilities.
yeah, I don't know. Other gateway drugs into the general films have included watching The Mandalorian, have included watching Star Wars Rebels for children. So I think I've included both watching The Mandalorian and watching Star Wars Rebels, which is a
Mhm.
more family-friendly series. And so it would tell you until the decapitations start.
That's it's one of those coming of age pieces of media. Uh, I view two options to hook a youth into Star Wars, I should say. I should clarify that before I commit anything to recording. Um,
Well,
but
Star Wars is a much more insidious drug than anything so banal as heroin.
sure, sure, and not as painful to get off. Anyway, uh, so I think that Force Awakens, Episode 7. is kind of poised as a gateway into Star Wars. It is a connection to A New Hope, just as far as the style goes, the uh, narrative beats, the core story of someone on a desert planet who leaves their home in order to find a galaxy adventure with space pirates and etc. and so forth. It's an echo and a response to what's been done in not just A New Hope, but all of Star Wars up to that point, for better and worse. I think that we've said before in the podcast, at least my personal opinion is that um, Force Awakens is the most rewatchable of the new trilogy. I prefer The Last Jedi. I prefer how challenging it is, but some of its humor challenges me even. Um, but from just an entertainment standpoint, The Force Awakens has a lot to offer. Um, but I think that the other option would be Clone Wars. Um, if people had the opportunity to say, from you know, sitting down as a child with my bowl of cereal, watching Saturday morning cartoons, the Clone Wars offers that first experience into the whole entire galaxy of aliens, Jedi, bounty hunters, crime lords, droids, dark side. Um, it's so expansive. It's you know everything that is has been Star Wars up until that point, and really everything that's Star Wars TV uh, goes back to Clone Wars, in some way, shape, or form. If some kid watched through that, it's like, okay, I, they have no idea that Anakin is Darth Vader. They just get this sense of, oh, this Clone Wars era is really intense. This is Star Wars to me. If they were able
Hmm.
to go from that to then watching chronologically episodes, uh, could be could be a release order, could be chronological order from that point. I would say go from release order just because that way you get that, oh my God, like uh Anakin was this, hero that I watched and grew up with was killed by this Darth Vader. I hate this Darth Vader. You have that uh gap of suspense to um sort of have even more passion for the characters that we start with in A New Hope.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as a gateway drug. And so then your viewing order would be that, and then see whatever the whim takes you. And that is ultimately the most important thing is to make sure that you're watching it in a way that maximizes your enjoyment of whatever it is. Not everyone is going to be a purist and watch everything like Connor and I. So presumably, if you're listening to this podcast, you're one of those people that's at least watched most of the films.
If
So
you've lived under a rock or you are from some part of the world where Star Wars has not reached, maybe you enjoy crime thrillers. So,
go watch
Andor.
Andor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely agree that where your interests lie, Star Wars has many different angles in order to find an entryway.
And I would posit before we get back to sort of the viewing order of the films that another common entryway into Star Wars for modern audiences are in the video game era
Mhm.
or area where, I mean, Lego Star Wars, I've heard, has been the introduction to the Star Wars stories for many people.
Oh, sure.
And I know Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor being, Souls-light games that are very solid mechanically, attracted audiences that then wanted to know, hey, what's the whole Force Jedi thing going on here? So I think you can be a gamer first and then a Star Wars fan second, and then get converted into a Star Wars fan by the quality of the storytelling in some of those game-oriented media.
Oh, sure. And the modern uh, Fallen Order games have a very well-contained story. And I think in previous generations, you can say that about Knights of the Old Republic, where people were coming to, it definitely as fans of Star Wars, but also, oh, there's this really popular game and it has fun mechanics.
I would still recommend the OG Knights of the Old Republic as a recommendation to anyone who wants a good experience, regardless if you're a Star Wars fan. Just go play that, and then go watch A New Hope and go from there. But play the game first. Yeah, so that would be another way to get into the Star Wars universe. But regardless of how you get into it, there are also other people that have strong opinions about the order in which you should watch the films. I know there's the famous machete order, Connor, if you're
Mhm.
familiar.
Yeah, is that where we go episodes 4, 5? We get the cliffhanger ending. We get the revelation of who Darth Vader is, and then it either starts 1, 2, 3, or even goes just 2, 3. Correct?
Yeah, depending on what version. The original machete order was just 2, 3 when
Hmm.
people hated the Phantom Menace. And then after the sequel trilogy came out, people were kind of like, maybe the Phantom Menace isn't so bad. And then reincorporated it into machete order. But yeah, it's 4, 5. You do learn who Darth Vader is. Then you do the flashback of the trilogy of movies that explains who he is. And then you do 6, which closes out the story of both trilogies.
I think it's interesting. I mean, it's a different way to experience it. I I understand it. I don't know if I would necessarily choose that as my preferred method.
No, because I would argue there are other subplots that are. I mean, it's not just Luke and Vader and the Emperor.
Mhm.
It's also you're putting Han and Leia's story on hold for 3 movies. You're putting R2D2 and C3PO back in time, and
Mhm.
our Rosencrantz and Guildenstern XPs do not age as well going back in time.
Yeah.
But so I would never, I think, recommend that as a first order. If you want
Mhm.
to rewatch it that way, sure, you've already know all the jokes,
Sure.
but well, not as a first viewing.
No.
And I think watching something chronologically, if you're doing it as a reviewing, can be fun because then you can see the connections and, oh, would this qualify as foreshadowing if this movie hadn't been released first? Or you're like, oh, there isn't any foreshadowing because people are supposed to already know. So that could be a fun intellectual exercise of watching things in chronological order, and then you see all the references that were made to things that haven't come that technically happen in the future. So it can be Star Wars can be a little incestuous that way.
Mhm. And a couple other ways as well, but that's a topic for another day. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other, like, as far as the films go, any other release orders that you feel are either popular or that we would talk about as options?
Not so much, but I it's strange. It's any other uh franchise, it would be easy to say just, oh yeah, do it chronologically, or oh yeah, do it release date. But there's so many different ways to enjoy Star Wars that it's hard to have one permanent one. But I think I just have a series of rules. Like for any sort of modern adult cinema faring person, I would say release date. If you're entering the series from any other point other than A New Hope for any other reason, probably just stick to chronological, because if you're starting with something else, it doesn't really matter when the Star Wars was made. It's going to look different compared to the next film, no matter what, because each Star Wars film has its own visual identity. It has its own sort of atmosphere. So I guess I have stipulations on how to watch rather than one true way that I always rewatch. How about yourself,
Yeah,
Alex?
I would say there's nothing wrong as once you've seen all the movies, just pick which one you want to watch. Give it a watch. I think watching a double feature of Rogue One into A New Hope is a fun time. You go from those are the two most war movie like of our movies in general. I guess uh, Return of the Jedi can also be classified as partially a war movie,
Mhm.
but um, yeah, and then you can watch Solo: A Star Wars Story as a companion to Empire Strikes Back for the character of Lando. So I can see the benefit to those if you're just looking to watch a film or a couple of films. But yeah, I'm still in release order if I'm going to rewatch everything.
Yeah. It's from, you know, especially someone who is aware of Star Wars, but just like not having seen it. I think that's the best way to go about it, because even the complexity in storytelling and the way that stories are told changes as time naturally moves. So uh, everything that's made at a point is a subsequent reaction to anything that came before.
No. And then just a brief aside, there's certain media that definitely needs to be watched after other media, and or you
Mhm.
could watch it any time. The Book of Boba Fett you can't watch until you've seen seasons 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian and have seen the original trilogy.
Mhm.
Required viewing. You're not going to understand what's going on.
Right.
Ahsoka, you must have watched Rebels seasons 1 through 4 because Ahsoka is Rebels season 5.
Mhm.
So you got to watch those till you understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's one thing that people point as a critique to Star Wars in that if someone were to just watch Rogue One, would they understand the significance of what Darth Vader is? It's like,
No,
oh, it's this plastic masked uh like robot man. It's not as clear, but um
see, you can dabble, and I guess this would be my thesis is that you can dabble in Star Wars, but it is a if you're getting involved in a giant multimedia franchise, it rewards you more the more you see, and that is the benefit of having all this media is that
mhm,
the more you understand and know, the more connections become apparent, and the greater impact it might have on you. You don't get the same reaction to the hallway scene with Vader in Rogue One if you don't have all of the media and years and weight going onto it. And I mean, you look at villains and characters in like Marvel and how many redesigns and different costumes they got.
mhm.
They made Darth Vader in 1977. They're like, yep, perfect. Keep him exactly as he is forever.
Yeah. No
And
updates necessary.
yep, no notes. Continue.
The more handmade and asymmetrical he is, the better. I it's interesting. It's you can just a small note on that. You can tell like Rogue One Vader is like a 7 out of 10 on like Vader essence accuracy, where Kenobi is more of like a 9 out of 10. Um, and then somehow A New Hope is somewhere in the middle.
Well, and Darth Vader's still a person, so he's allowed to have good days and bad days,
Oh yeah,
or bad days and worse days.
bad helmet days.
Yeah.
But yeah, any other thoughts when it comes to potential viewing orders?
That's about all I have today. Just if I'm going to make a recommendation, just release order.
Mhm,
Anything.
mhm.
Books, video games, movies, release order, guys.
Yeah.
Do it in the order that the creators created it.
Yeah, especially if you're a fully formed person, adult, that's what I would start with.
No,
If you're a
kids
fully formed
listening,
adult, I would not say Clone Wars right away. I think Clone Wars is more of a if you love it so much that you respect the movies and can watch a show that was, started aimed at children, then watch Clone Wars. If you're a child, watch Clone Wars.
yeah, you could do that, or kids. You could, one, laugh at how we said the word jackass earlier, and two, just go watch A New Hope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
So,
whatever
so
way.
Connor's idea is good too. The Clone Wars is amazing,
Mhm. Mhm.
but you want to be cultured, right? You want to be the cultured child. Just go watch it.
Eh, I think in a family you could have even the cultured ones and the jackass laughing ones. So uh, as long as they both enjoy Star Wars, I'm happy.
I suppose I won't gatekeep.
Yeah. So yes, thank you all, and let us know if you have an unusual or one of the aforementioned ways of watching Star Wars.
All right, thank you for listening today to our viewing order and gateways to Star Wars, and have a great week.
Until next time.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.